But the first speaker is Jason Dean, who's going to be talking about global events in the economy and Bitcoin and what's next. Now, that's cool, and Jason's obviously knows about the topic and to speak about it, but what you probably don't know about him is that he's one of the owners of a racing team. And it's a Bitcoin racing team as well, which is fantastic. So here to keep us ahead of the pack, please welcome Jason Dean.
Okay, so I'm going to use this one. Yep, we're good to go. Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all here. Obviously, when they said to me that you'd be opening Thursday morning, I thought it'd be fabulous. What an honour and a privilege. Of course, the other way of thinking about this is it's the second day of a conference and everyone's been out for a few drinkies. But I prefer to think of it the other way around. Now, my name's Jason Dean. As you know, I've been full-time in the crypto space for over 5 years. Most of that, especially in the last few years, entirely focused on Bitcoin, really, and how the world's events are affecting its adoption, and actually vice versa as well. I'm a writer, published a couple of books. I'm a chief Bitcoin analyst at Quantum Economics, which is Matty Greenspan's outfit, and Matty is here today. He's treading these very boards yesterday. As Eric mentioned, I'm part owner of the Bitcoin racing team. I'm also community lead at the Bitcoin Pioneers. But there's more. I'm also a Bitcoin miner, having been mining for some years. And in fact, in addition to my operation in Siberia, in Russia, which has obviously got quite interesting in the last 9 months, I'm currently involved with setting up a mining operation in Texas with Quantum Expeditions and Costa Rica with Renewal Blocks. It's fair to say I'm kind of heavily involved in the whole Bitcoin scene. So why am I here talking to you today? Well, some of you may also know that I write a column every Friday morning for Crypto AM. And that column is really my kind of week's take on what's been going on and how it's affecting Bitcoin and crypto to a certain extent as well. Now, when we were putting this together, we had this idea that it would be really cool to do a kind of live version on Thursday morning. Only, of course, it's only afterwards we thought, well, actually, that means I can't actually put it together until Thursday morning. So this is as up to date as I could get it. So what is going on economically? Right, I think we can summarize it and say it's not going well. Is probably the best term I think we can use there. Now, economically speaking, the world is very noisy right now. And as I've only got sort of 10, 15 minutes, I've actually had a real challenge trying to work out what I would and wouldn't include this morning. But before we get to the big kind of macro picture in Bitcoin, we need to address perhaps the elephant in the room, the crypto industry as a whole. And I think we can also say it's not going well. Now, we all know that this year's become legendary, probably go down as the annus horribilis of the crypto industry. We've had Luna, Terra USD, Celsius, 3AC, Voyager, FTX, BlockFi, I mean, the list just goes on. Collectively, tens of billions of dollars lost due to terrible ideas, mismanagement, complete lack of accountability or oversight, and actually simple corruption, if we're completely honest. But we've also had losses due to sloppy security, Nomad Bridge, probably remember that one, Wormhole Bridge, Axie Infinity, to name a few. It's another billion or so there. It's probably small fry in the grand scheme of it now. It is a bit of a mess, so make no mistake. I think this could be as impactful as Mt. Gox. Matty and I were talking about this the other day. He disagrees, so we're going to see how history plays out on this one. But it's going to be a big impact anyway. There are going to be some more casualties, probably, as more services come under pressure from lack of confidence or people withdrawing their crypto to self-custody. We're not through this thing yet. Also, of course, in sort of related news commercially, we've got Meta's laid off 11,000 workers as the metaverse projects just haven't really come through as Mark Zuckerberg thought. 11,000 people, it's incredible. And then we've got Elon Musk busy turning Twitter into well, whatever Elon Musk is turning Twitter into, I guess we'll find out. Also at the expense of massive redundancies. So we are in a time of incredible change. But in a way, we've been here before, haven't we? So in the late 1990s, new ideas based on this thing called the internet were coming through thick and fast. You may not know that in 1999, there were 457 internet-related company IPOs in that year. The Nasdaq hit a new all-time high on March the 10th, 2000, only to lose 80% of that value by October that year. It was a total wipeout, really, of much of what had been built was kind of razed to the ground. Now, let's see if we can draw any comparisons. So back then, we had a whole bunch of copycat concepts like search engines. So we had Google, Yahoo, they're still around, of course, but we also had AltaVista, Excite, InfoSeek, Ask Jeeves, I don't know if anyone remembers those, and there were others as well. There were social media versions as well. We had MySpace, The Globe, Kibu. These are all early versions. And I always think about, if you look at CoinMarketCap, there are lots of coins that claim to have the same functionality. So perhaps we're going to see some of that be removed. Now, there are also some really stupid ideas called, hello, I'm back. There's a company called DigiSense. Does anyone remember that one? You do? Okay, they've created something called the iSmell device, which would actually recreate smells in your room according to what you were searching for online. We can probably think of a few coins that fit that bill. They actually got funding. They did go ahead and fund. There were also some pure scam companies. There were people like CyberRelate, Pixel, and Sudo. If you don't know these guys, look them up. Incredible stories. They all got funding, and they all went on to do really crazy stuff. Again, I'm sure we can think of some coins that fit the bill there. Now, all were wiped out by the dot-com bust, but it did lead to sort of better controls, better regulation, and actually just some common sense in the marketplace, and that allowed companies with kind of legitimate use cases to really grow. I'm sure we'll see the same thing happening here ultimately with crypto. So if you're working on solid ideas with solid use cases, don't be disheartened. There are better times ahead. History definitely rhymes. So what about Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin itself is entirely unaffected by any of this. Now, not in terms of the most used metric, of course, which is price. Bitcoin is still very much traded as a risk-on asset, and it's still often lumped together with crypto as a whole. We know, of course, they are different things. But confidence in the future remains absolute. You only need to look at things like the numbers of new wallets, expanding Lightning network capacity, and consistently increasing mining hash rate, which in some ways kind of defies logic at the moment. Because there are quite a lot of miners who are under serious pressure right now. You probably saw that Core Scientific released some information yesterday. They're responsible, by the way, for about 10% of the global hash rate. And they announced pretty much that they're going to run out of money by the end of the year and actually didn't pay some of their debt in October. So there is big, big, big pressure out there. But if you're a Bitcoiner, it's hard to find someone who isn't very bullish about the future. And particularly if you understand the macro picture, because once you see Bitcoin, you kind of can't unsee how it works. So what is the macro picture? What exactly is going on here? And what can I cover in the few minutes I've got left? Well, I had the pleasure of interviewing Adam Farrington at the Bitcoin Collective Conference in Edinburgh last month. He's the author of Bitcoin is Venice, which is a very good book if you've not read it. It's pretty heavy going. And the main reason is he has a brain the size of a planet, especially when it comes to macroeconomic stuff. The conclusion that we came to between us is that really there are no good outcomes from where we are now. There's just degrees of pain, really. So think about that for a minute. I am older than our entire fiat-based monetary system that we're using now. So I was born, technically, in the final years of a gold standard. Now, most of the people in this room, but there might be a couple who can say that as well, but most of the people in the room, I don't think, can say that either. But even if you don't fully understand the ridiculous complexities of the current financial system, and if you don't, by the way, I recommend the book Layered Money by Nick Bartia. It's a very, very good book, really take you through how all this stuff works, or doesn't work in some cases. You will certainly be feeling it in your pocket, because unless you've got an 11.1% pay rise in this country this year, your spending power is going backwards right now. But we can also see the same thing play out in history, and it gives us a trend to think about now. There is something called the Hank-Kruss hyperinflation table. I've written a few articles about this in the past. And what this does is this table tracks all the hyperinflationary events that have occurred in modern history. Now, hyperinflation, in case you don't know, is just when money devalues at such an incredibly fast rate, it becomes pretty much pointless. There are technical definitions, but that's all we need for today. There's a couple of things that highlight the problem and maybe where we're going. So between 1700 and 1900, 200 years, there was only one hyperinflationary event, and that occurred in 1790 after the French Revolution, when the French came off the gold standard temporarily, and of course it ended in complete and total disaster. So, based on that one data point, it's a 1 in 200 year event. Then between 1900 and 1971, there were 15 events. That's 15 currencies that collapsed completely. And now almost all of those were due to either directly or indirectly due to war and financing war machines. 1971, we came off the gold standard for good, moved to our current kind of fiat system. And in the first 40 years that followed, there were 40 failures. So that's 1 a year we're now down to. Now that number currently of failed currencies since then is now around 55. So we've gone from a 1 in 200 year problem to 1 in every roughly 10 months. So do we think that rate is going to slow down? No, of course not. All currencies ultimately trend to zero, or fiat currencies, I should say. So what's causing this? Well, lots of things really. But in the last 2 years, there have been 2 significant events that have added extra pressure to a system that was already struggling. The first was COVID-19. Governments don't really save up for a rainy day like you or I do. When they need a bit of money, they can just create a little bit more. And our government did this, and so did many other governments around the world, which of course naturally devalues money anyway. But shutting the economy down also has problems, particularly with supply lines. And some of those supply lines, it's not very easy to bring back online again. And just as we were kind of getting to grips with this, just as we had a chance to do it, President Putin went mad and invaded Ukraine in what will almost certainly be viewed as one of the biggest geopolitical errors of judgment in history. Now, Putin, of course, can't win from this point, whatever happens, but he can do a lot of damage. And that's putting aside the complete waste of life that's going on here, and something like that gets me really angry. But this isn't the 1940s anymore. Our economies are now linked at the speed of light. So news travels instantly, supply lines can be closed quickly, entire networks like the visa system in Russia can be shut down at the push of the button. Everything changes in an instant, and very often it's hard to rebuild the things that are shut down. So economically speaking, Russia is finished, probably militarily as well. The brain drain is massive. All those skill sets, particularly in IT, have gone elsewhere. Georgia's economy, as you've probably seen, is doing extraordinarily well with the influx of Russian money and Russian skill sets, although not everyone is actually happy about that, but it's happening anyway. I'd be very surprised to see Russia reach its current standard of living again in my lifetime. Such is the level of damage inflicted. My last visit to Russia was just before the war started, actually, in a couple of months, and I honestly believe I don't ever think I'll be going back there. Of course, this has had a massive effect on global supplies of not just oil and gas but in Europe, but elsewhere as well. But it's also affected things like food distribution, such as grain. And all of these things have created price pressures, and that's now part of what we're seeing filtering through. All against this backdrop of total uncertainty and a financial system that's under significant pressure. Here in the UK, we've just entered a recession, and standards of living are falling and are likely to keep falling for some time yet, as our money continues to weaken and those pressures play out. However, it's not just us. Last month's report from the UN Conference on Trade and Development makes really concerning reading. There's a particular quote, I've written it down. A global slowdown could potentially inflict worse damage than the financial crisis in 2008 and the COVID-19 shock in 2020. Excuse me. Now, we've had global slowdowns before, of course, but this time we are particularly vulnerable. We are collectively on the ropes, and it feels like we're waiting for the knockout blow. Central banks, of course, are using their default weapon of increasing rates, and that's had an adverse effect on trade overall, especially for developing countries. It's a complex relationship how that works, but that's ultimately how it plays out. We already know that around 90 of the developing countries have all lost significant value against the dollar. That's their currencies, I should say. And of course, the dollar itself is falling. It's just dropping at a slower rate. It's like the ship that's sinking the slowest, ultimately. Debt distress is growing in South Asia, Western Asia. Sri Lanka has fallen into sovereign default. Afghanistan remains in debt distress. Turkey, Pakistan, actually plenty of others, face rising bond yields. So according to Trading Economics' last summary, there are now 45 countries in the world that have inflation rates over 15%. This is the level where it starts to get a little bit serious. 9 of these have rates over 50%, and 5, Zimbabwe, Lebanon, I forgot the other one, Venezuela, Syria, and Sudan, have rates over 100%. At that level, it's impossible to manage money. These countries will soon find themselves added to the Hank Cross hyperinflation table, followed by others. So our legacy system is a mess. And of course, I'm just going through the headline numbers here. Even worse, I'm sorry to do this here on a Thursday morning after some of you had a couple of beers, but there is really no way out from here, mathematically speaking. These debt levels can never be repaid. And at some point, we won't even be able to service the interest. Now, I'm not going to go all Greg Foss on you, because he explains this way better than I ever could, but do look up some of his work as he really talks through some of this stuff, how it works. But the point is, we're in uncharted territory now. The system will break. That we know is mathematically certain. But it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, it could even be 20 years. If we look at somewhere like Japan, which has basically been front-running this whole kind of concept for the last couple of decades, the economy is still running. We could hang on for some time yet. Of course, if you're into Bitcoin, understand the global view. It's tempting to think this is an opportunity. Well, it kind of is, but it's not going to be fun, and it's not going to be easy, and a whole lot of people could be in a horrible situation for quite some time as this situation unfolds. Meanwhile, the crypto industry, I believe, will absolutely grow and thrive from here. We are very early. We are still learning. You guys are still developing ideas, if nothing else. We've learned a lot recently about what doesn't work. I think we can say that for sure. But going forward, you'll work through this, and the new opportunities ahead will be amazing. But anyway, back to Bitcoin, and this year's downturn has had an effect on adoption rates. They're still going up, but the rate is now slower than it was if you look at wallet creation rates. We never really know how many users there are with Bitcoin, of course, because of the way that addresses and wallets work. But BuyBitcoinWorldwide.com, is a mouthful, that one, estimates there to be currently around 200 million wallets with around 106 million actual users. Now, Coinbase, Statista, Blockchain.com, they kind of come in around the sort of same range of numbers. It's as good a number as any because we can never be entirely sure. You may also notice that we reached 8 billion population recently. So if you do the maths, the penetration there is very, very small. We've got a long way to go. Interestingly, though, we have seen a trend of wallets accumulating more than one Bitcoin actually increasing in rate, especially really significantly in the last month or two. And that number is now almost at 1 million wallets. So adoption is happening. Even here in the UK, companies like Coin Corner and Bridge to Bitcoin are out there every day helping companies accept Bitcoin in a retail environment, and there are some really cool solutions out there. New ones, new places you can go to spend your Bitcoin are popping up all the time on some of the maps, so it's great to see those maps proliferating. But some countries are ahead of us. Africa, for example, has high adoption rates of Bitcoin and crypto, and this is likely to keep growing. And it's interesting to see an outright rejection of Nigeria's CBDC, the Naira, by the population, who actually seem to understand the difference between a CBDC and other things. The most common cited reason for that, of course, was distrust of the government. Just 2 weeks ago, Pick n Pay, a large chain of shops in the Western Cape of Africa, announced they will be accepting Bitcoin in native form. It sounds great, but these days, these announcements are no longer a kind of big thing. It's happening daily across the world. And finally, no summary of Bitcoin will be complete without mentioning El Salvador. It's now just been over a year since Bitcoin became by law a national currency alongside the dollar. Nayib Bukele, the president of the country, has come under real pressure from the IMF and actually other international agencies for doing this, but he's gone ahead and done it anyway. And I actually went out there at the end of September to see how it was going and meet some of the government dignitaries. Now, I cannot express to you the feeling of optimism the people of this country have. I really can't get it across. It is genuinely moving. Now, apart from the fact that El Salvador is now the safest country in Latin America, after being for decades the most dangerous country in Latin America, is pretty incredible. But Bitcoin has added a new dimension. Cost of money transfers have fallen. This is the thing that Jack Mallers was really getting passionate about at Miami 2021, but not quite as much as was forecasted. But El Salvador's GDP has increased by over 10% in the first year since Bitcoin was installed as a currency. That's more than 19 out of the 20 G20 countries. India's the only exception there, 13.4%. Now, this is mainly due to tourism by Bitcoiners, because if you build it, they will come, and of course, investment by Bitcoin-related companies. But there are other factors here as well. Now, what this means is the rest of the world is kind of poised to head into decline. El Salvador, right now, is the place to be. I can tell you firsthand, the opportunity there is pretty serious. You need to really keep an eye out on this tiny little nation. There is still a long way to go, though. Many places outside the capital, San Salvador, still don't accept Bitcoin, and actually a lot of the people there still don't really properly understand it. So it's interesting to note that even in a country where people, technically speaking, are required to accept it by law, there's still a lot of work to be done. So that gives an indication of just how much work is ahead for us in other countries as well. But make no mistake, in my opinion, and it is my opinion, Bitcoin will continue to grow and develop into sound money, a reliable and trustless medium of exchange and the world's best store of value. You, either directly or indirectly, are part of that future. And without what we're all doing collectively, the outlook would be a whole lot bleaker. So thank you for coming to this event. Thank you for being the pioneers in this new generation of opportunity. And thank you for listening.